This meeting is being recorded. I'm out the door. No. 1987 at Friends General Conference gathering. There was a workshop on earth care led by Bill and Alice Howenstein. And everyone looked around the room at each other and said, we need a continuation of this work. And at that point, Friends Committee on Unity with Nature was formed. And the last paragraph of their epistle from 1987 said, we believe right relationship with our natural environment is basic to the achievement of peace and a just social order and the equitable distribution of the world's resources, both today and for generations to come. Arising from this gathering is a continuing organization of friends concerned with unity with nature. We call on friends everywhere to join us in support of this group and in continuing consideration of and witness to a corporate testimony on living in unity with nature. So that was the beginning in 1987 when they spoke originally of our responsibility for unity with nature. I want to read you two more pieces. The first one being today's vision and witness statement from QEW. So this is what guides our work today in our vision and witness statement. We are called to live in right relationship with all creation, recognizing that the entire world is interconnected and is a manifestation of God. We work to integrate into the beliefs and practices of the Religious Society of Friends the truth that God's creation is to be respected, protected, and held in reverence in its own right. And the truth that human aspirations for peace and justice depend upon restoring the Earth's ecological integrity. We promote these truths by being patterns and examples, by communicating our message, and by providing spiritual and material support to those engaged in the compelling task of transforming our relationship to the earth. And the last thing I would like to read to you, I remember, gosh, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 15, somebody in QEW said, what is going on that we are not more closely bound to Friends Committee on National Legislation? And we all decided that was a pretty good idea and have been cultivating that relationship ever since, going to their meetings, having them come to our meetings, working well with these amazing Quaker lobbyists. In fact, off topic, what I would like to say to you is I strongly encourage you to have Clarence Edwards and Maria Schreiner come and talk to you about FCNL's Earth Care work. They are amazing. We had them come to our last gathering and they're wonderful. And they're doing this work for Friends Committee on National Legislation.
Would you give those names again, please?
Sure, Clarence Edwards. I'm very proud of myself. I've been calling him Clarence Thomas for days, and I know that's wrong. Clarence Edwards, yeah, big mistake. Clarence Edwards and Maria Schreiner. And I just, the March, April 2021, the lead article is Mitigation in the Climate Crisis, written by Clarence Edwards. So, bless their hearts, the back cover is some interview from our General Secretary, Shelley Tannenbaum. And so the first question was, how would you describe the work of Quaker Earthcare Witness? And Shelley replied, QEW's work comes from a spiritual center that sees all of nature as connected. From this spiritual core, we focus on ecological integrity and environmental justice. As a network, we share stories of what friends and others are doing to support Earth care, and we share resources and offer a space for reflection and contemplation. So that's all my reading for right now. Want to talk a little bit about current QEW life and then check in and see what questions or comments you all have. I want to get this thing out of here. Okay. If you were to walk into a QEW meeting today, my hunch is that you would look around and say, well, this looks just like Quakers, because we are. Our foundation is being friends. And so you would walk into a meeting and see the clerk's table and hear the committee reports and hear what was new amongst us. And it would just feel like a good old Quaker meeting, which it is. We are within and supported by Quakerism. We have committees for outreach, for spiritual nurturance, for publications, and part of publications is befriending creation. How many of you are familiar with befriending creation? Ah, Bill, hooray. Susan, hooray. Okay, guys, so you have some work to do. I don't like it myself, but befriending creation is online. And Hope, what's up? You're muted, my dear.
I had trouble hearing what you said. Befriending Creation, the wonderful newsletter. Sorry.
You got it? Okay. All right. We have 3 new things going on that I want to share with you. Fitting with what I was talking about FCNL, we are welcoming a new working group called the Friends Committee on National Legislation Working Group. And they meet regularly with FCNL staff and bring to us the important information about what FCNL is doing that we also need to be supporting. So it's our bridge people, the Committee on FCNL. Probably since I walked through the door, we have had ongoing discussions, and I don't even remember when that was. It was a while ago, about the value of action versus contemplation as friends. Many of us have said, you know, unless we're spiritually grounded, we're nowhere. And others have said, unless we're doing something active, we're nowhere. So we have recently welcomed a group that is called the Direct Action Working Group, begun by a woman in the Washington area who has deep roots in her community and has found that people come to her and say, we're working on this project, can the Quakers help? And so the people who are on this Direct Action Working Group are seeking training from Equate. Are y'all familiar with Equate? No, okay. Earth Quaker Action Team. They were activists who began their work working on working in the coal country to stop some of the coal mining. And they were incredibly creative. They would go into board meetings at a bank wearing a suit coat and halfway through take it off and it would say, Earth Quaker Action Team, stop the mountaintop removal on the back of the t-shirt. So at some point, I forget which bank it is, but one of the banks that had Quaker roots stopped funding mountaintop removal because of their work. They are phenomenal. George Lakey, Elaine Flanagan, and a whole group of people were a part of Equate. And so we have decided as a community, QEW, that we want to know what they know. And our new direct action working group is going to be getting training from them and see where we go in our communities with direct action. And the last one, before I ask how we doing on time, we've got lots of time. Before I ask what the questions are, we really struggled with what to do about racial equity in QEW. There were people who said, it's wonderful work, but it's not our work. You know, we hold them in the light and we let them do their work. And there were people who said, we cannot walk away from this work. We have to be involved in racial equity work in QEW. And I was one of the people who said, oh, no, we don't. We do not have to be involved in racial equity work. And there were 7 of us who said, well, not only do I believe we have to be involved, but we're going to take action about it. And they did the training on racial equity that American Friends Service Committee offered. And last April, they did a workshop for us at QEW that was incredibly powerful. And I came away saying, maybe it is our work. Maybe it is our work to work with racial equity and racial justice. And as these things happen, no, that was last October. And as these things happen, this past April, we met virtually. We've been meeting virtually now for how long? A good 2 years, I think. One of the women who came to the National QEW gathering lived in Minneapolis and has a half-Black son who is 13. And we met the weekend that was the ending of the trial for Derek Chauvin about the George Floyd murder. And this woman was a wreck. She was saying, I can't stand this. Depending on the verdict, there may be riots. My son will probably be out in those riots. And she was sick and we were sick with her. And we had a 15-minute update scheduled Sunday afternoon. And it turned into an hour because we needed to talk about what this meant to us as human beings and as Quakers. And it was probably one of the most difficult and profound meetings we've ever had. But it felt really right that we should look at the world around us and how we needed to hold people in the light. So we did. And I don't know how our racial equity work will continue and where the divisions will be. I will tell you that I checked with one of the people from the group of 7 and said, are you guys available to go on the road? You know, can I suggest that St. Pete have you to come and do your presentation? And he said, not yet. They're not clear on where they are and how much they want to do more presentations. But if they do go back on the road, I really invite you to get in touch with them and listen about this. You know, one of the good parts of this world is it's so easy for me to just turn on my computer and have the morning with you. And it can be the same with them. So I'm good for quite a bit of talk about QEW, but I want to make space for questions and comments from you all. What do you need to say to me or ask me? Up, Bill, hi.
Hello. Based on patterns I've seen in the past, so this sort of slanting my question, has QEW simply supported the racial work, or is QEW bringing a unique earth care element to saying, how can earth care affect and influence our relationships with people of color?
I don't know how to answer that, because another piece that I almost got into, and I'm gonna block on the name, the doctrine of discovery, that document that was written decades, centuries ago, saying we have the right to do whatever the heck we want to those people who used to live there before us. And there was a tremendous amount of learning and looking and checking ourselves and looking at what the dominator model ends us up. It ends us up as white people to say, I have power over you. And I have the right to exercise my power whenever and however I wish. Which leads me to a story that I'm gonna hold on to. So I think with our awareness that domination, power over, is our familiar place. And so domination over African Americans, domination over the earth are both power over positions. And that's how we recognize them as a part of the same. Does that answer it? That's our consciousness. Does that speak to?
That speaks very foundationally to the issue. I guess what I've seen, though, in other situations is where someone caring for the earth starts just working for justice with Black people voting rights or something like that, instead of helping, just using African Americans as an example, helping that community begin to connect with the natural world, which is part of what Earth Care is doing. And that's a critical element that's missing in our culture from my perspective.
I do not know of any projects. And I think that that would be something that all of us would nod our heads and say, absolutely. I see you, Hope, and I'll get right with you in a second. One of the women in QEW who lives in Kansas has been really involved with the regenerative agriculture movement. And understanding that there are Black farmers who have been given less money, less support, less land, and that needs to be righted. Still is not what I think you're talking about. I think you're talking about sharing time in nature. And yes, that is incredibly valuable. And so far, nobody has felt it as a lead-in. Nobody has said, yes, I'm taking that on, which is how we primarily work. What's your leading? So
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. It's worth talking about. Maybe more will come up around that. I don't know. Let me see what Hope wanted to say. Are you still? Yeah.
One of the things that has been helpful to me, and I would like you to hear that QEW has done in befriending creation, is increase my awareness, and it's obvious, but I didn't make the connection between the destruction of the earth in areas and poverty and race. So I think those connections that QEW is making that help those in power realize that the poverty, race, ethnicity imbalance is existing in destruction of the earth. So that if you are a person who is poor or Black or Hispanic, and my gosh, if you're one of our First Nations, you have a much greater likelihood of living in a land that harms you, because that's where you get put. That's where you get put. And I do think, Mary Jo, that is something that is being done that is really important. And I don't think that needs to be minimized, because there are those who may not realize that aspect of discrimination, and I do think that's important work you're already doing, and it needs to continue for those of us who want to do the right thing but don't know. Thank you.
Sure. And the connections, the circle of connections is widening. Like in Charlotte, there are many, many people in the faith community who are coming to know one another and know what African-American churches are putting solar panels up and which ones have community gardens, and who a pastor that I know went to protest the Line 3 and pipeline. So it's not just our QEW people, but now it's all of us in our community that are doing this work on this consciousness, which is wonderful. I don't see any questions from the peanut gallery. There's a delicate line in living in an earth care world that has to be attended to. And my work is that I'm a clinical social worker. And so I'm very aware of the mental health dangers of a world where we are conscious of earth care. It's not an easy path to walk. And some of what we look at is very painful and very difficult. And I'm going to tell this story anyhow. So I guess that was my preliminary warning. Through the work that I have learned about from my friends who are doing regenerative agriculture work, I have learned that there's a history in the South that probably should not have surprised me. Cotton is incredibly dangerous as a crop for the earth. It sucks the nutrients out of the soil. It's harder on the earth. It needs careful cultivation and careful balance, which was not happening in pre-Civil War days. And so the destruction of the earth was a serious part of what was happening. And when it became clear, this is gross, I shouldn't be, when it became clear that the land was no longer going to support growth as much as it needed to because of the dangers of the cotton crop, some Southern farmers switched to another cash crop, which was selling Black families, making their profit by selling especially young Black men. And that's a hard one to look at. I see a hand up in the St. Pete. Yes, is that Susan?
Yeah. Hey,
Hi.
Marjo.
Hey.
Hi. I'm wondering if QEW has made any kind of an attempt to take its message to farmers organizations like Farm Bureau and a different ranchers association that are in any area, to see if they can get any response from these big, large family farms, farms that farm tens of thousands of acres, as well as corporations.
How QEW often operates, and that's a really important question, Susan, thank you, is through individual leadings. And so the woman I know in Kansas who first alerted me and mine to regenerative agriculture works with the community of regenerative ag, which has tremendous amounts of information and tremendous people signing on now. I don't know how much work they've done actually with the thousands of acre farms. You know, money is a huge issue for that. So I would have to say, no, we have not taken that on. And it certainly needs to be taken on, and it is being taken on. One of the treats that I have is I get to write a little column in Befriending Creation called From the Clerk's Table. And one of the recent Befriending Creations, I began with a quote from the Green Cover Seed catalog, talking about how their work is grounded in their belief in God and their love for the earth. And I was like, oh, you know, so we are aware of the slow healing of the earth that's coming from regenerative ag and supporting it through our members. But no, nobody has taken on the big farmers yet. And I will be glad for the day when somebody has the energy to do that. Thank you. It's a great question. Susan. I think you're muted, my dear. Susan, you're muted. Yeah. Thank you.
I thought I just unmuted, sorry. My husband was a farmer. They had 20 acres of corn in Missouri. And I'm guessing that what Susan White's talking about is the small farm bureaus that deal with small farms, you know, maybe 2,000 acres or 500 acres or 20 acres like Daryl and his dad had. And I'm wondering if your answer covers those folks. I hear you talking about the large things, which I think maybe FCNL work would help, but the small farm bureaus, you know, they're great meetings. I've gone to some of those and everybody knows everybody and they're slapping each other in the back and checking on the krauts and isn't it awful we haven't had rain and all that stuff. And it strikes me that those are groups that would be really powerfully impacted by what you're doing or have a lot to contribute.
I appreciate that. And I wish my buddy Carol Barta was here because she's the person who's in touch with the regenerative ag people. She's the new clerk of outreach. I believe that the regenerative ag people are doing that work and doing a beautiful job of it. And it's very much grounded in their faith and it's spreading like crazy because the people who began that work are now settled enough in regenerative ag that they can make money on it. Their farms can survive. And one of the dirty little secrets in this country is the number of farmers who are committing suicide because they cannot support themselves on their farms. And so regenerative ag is giving them another alternative and it's wonderful. So that work is good and continuing, even without us. We struggle all the time because we want to do everything. We want to work with every single issue all the time. And how to work with our own sense of sadness and despair is a part of our work. Other questions or comments? I see an orange shirt.
I'm not sure it's the most important comment, but if you ever have an opportunity to drive up the Blues Highway from Mississippi on up, that's all Black farmers along Route 61, just east of the Mississippi. I've done it twice because it's so informative. And they're not small farms, but they are the farms that aren't being treated fairly by the government. The other comment I wanted to make is Pam and I just came back from 2 weeks in an RV. I think it's comic that they call living in an RV camping because it has nothing to do with camping other campfires. But after 2 weeks, we probably met hundreds of people also staying in RVs and only 2 Black families in that entire. Of all the places we went, I would imagine there's more than 1,000 possibilities, campsites, but only 2 Black families. And I have to add that I don't know, but I think they were being representative of the Black community. In both cases, they were very social. In both cases, they came out and shook as many hands as they could. And I was very pleased to see that. Having said that, I'd say half of the time that we settled in for the evening, it was next to a Hispanic family. I was quite surprised to find out, to realize how many people, now this is coming up Route 95, they all came from Miami.
Herb, you need to speak up a little more, please.
In the campground, there were very few African Americans, but there were a lot of Hispanic people. I'd say 1/3 of the people in the campsites were Hispanic.
Wow, who knew?
Well, I think our proximity to Miami was part of it. In other words, going up Interstate 95.
Ah,
You wouldn't find the same thing if you went up Interstate 70.
it's a very interesting and delicate piece of work to figure out how to interface and connect respectfully with Black families and Hispanic families, and to live the life that I think we would probably all want to live, you know, more connected to other minorities. It's hard work and very important work. Hope.
I think Larry and I have volunteered for the Forest Service and the Pisgah National Forest since the early 90s, one way or another. And I am pleased to say that there are, at least in North Carolina where we volunteer, and we do a lot, is there is a real awareness of the lack of diversity in the forest. So it is a priority of the Forest Service in that area to reach out, to promote, to both Black and Hispanic. Interestingly enough, the Hispanics are way underrepresented in the forest. Our Black families are more likely to camp and to come up and to hike and do things. Our Hispanic families are more likely to stay on the edge. So it may depend on how, and I'm guessing here, how persecuted they are in the community. Because where we are, having a Hispanic part of the community, very rural agricultural area, people are scared, you know, the main population. And so their initial introduction to the Hispanic introduction wasn't very positive. It's getting better. So where I'm kind of thinking is one of the things that there are many organizations working on that connection. I'm sure I only know a couple because that's a very small community, trying to weave those connections. But maybe one of the things, and I think it does it, Mary Jo, you get really tired. You know, when I look at her big strokes and small strokes, and I'm pretty good at small strokes, doing this. And, you know, I worked with a local Hispanic age group that we brought kids into the forest and took them up and did things with them. But if you're only doing small strokes, you don't see big rewards. You look at the nation and go, oh my gosh, it doesn't matter at all. And I think one of the things that you can do to help, and I think you do to help, but I think those of us doing the small strokes, and in the end, I think it'll be the small strokes will make a huge difference. Letting us know that those small strokes are still worth doing, and encouraging us, because those of us, you know, I'm getting in the campground, but making sure you're welcoming to all people, greeting that of God in every human. When one can't speak the language, greeting someone in their own language, making an effort. Those are small strokes, and they're changing one person at a time, but that's how change comes. Legislative change changes law. People change people. And I think that's something we all have to carry, in my thoughts, the burden of, is changing ourselves and reaching out and walking the life we want to see and connecting with others. Thank you.
I see you, George, and I just want to take a minute and absorb that powerful message from you. I think it is so important to trust the small strokes, because otherwise it becomes too difficult. You know, I can spiral myself into a depression in 20 seconds flat when I think about how old my nieces and nephews will be in 2030. It doesn't take much for me to want to just go in the closet and sit on the floor. But to say, I'm doing what I can do today according to the best of my light is comforting. So thank you for that. George,
Yes.
good morning.
You spoke about how cotton depletes the soil.
Mhm.
Now, this has been known for a long time. And in American history class, when I was a kid, they talked about how they use crop rotation by growing different crops in the soil after, and that would help bring the soil back so that they actually had a sustainable system. Also, adding fertilizer, people used fertilizers even back in Bible days. They weren't as good as modern ones, but they were less chemically too. But even George Washington used crop rotation in his estate. And I think it's important to realize that the cotton growers do give back to the earth by using different crops.
I think there are always many sides to any story. And part of what we work to balance is how to be fair to all sides in our work with Q. So I appreciate that input. Susan.
Could you give us the most recent dire report about the condition of the earth? I heard you mention 2030.
Mhm.
What do you expect to happen in 2030? That's 9 years away.
Hang on, let me get it. One of the life-changing moments for me was I met a man from 350.org who's working in Broward County, because Bill McKibben is my absolute hero. He's amazing. He's person who founded 350.org. And I was just reading an article of his, The End of the World as We Know It, from one of the magazines. Oh, sometimes.
Mary Jo, I am sorry to say this. It is 10:19. I have not been paying attention to the clock because I just want you to go on and on. You want to give us a reference and then we'll need to close.
I will give you a reference. I'll email you a reference because I have a closing piece. And if we're
Okay.
at 19, I am particularly delighted by my own self in this closing I want to do.
Okay, please do. And then we will.
Go into some silence.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. Let me find the relevant papers here. That may take some doing. It's not easy doing Earthcare work. It's not easy being part of QEW. We want to do everything all of the time and still not be exhausted. So it's important to me to find comfort where I can. And there are two small quotes that I want to give you by way of closing, by way of saying thank you for your participation Thank you for being here this morning. And let me read my 2 quotes. Each day, each chance is small. Have patience with the insignificance. It is very important. Almost anything we do will be insignificant, but it is very important that we do it. And those words were written by Gandhi. And this is from the clerk's table, Quaker Earthcare Witness, October, November, December 2019. For myself, I take my comfort wherever I can find it. And a favorite source of comfort for me is Alice in Wonderland. I wrote this, guys. I didn't write that. There is no use in trying, said Alice. One cannot believe impossible things. I dare say you haven't had much practice, replied the Queen. Why, when I was your age, I always did it for an hour a day. Why, sometimes I have believed 6 impossible things even before breakfast. Thank you all for taking time to come and be together this morning. I appreciate your attention. I appreciate your contributions. I appreciate the chance to be with you. I appreciate Susan for this wonderful idea. And shall we? Yeah, and it's nice to see you, Hope. Shall we close with some silence? Does that feel like the next thing? Okay.
Yes.
Susan says yes. So thank you, friends, and let's close with a moment of silence.